The atmospheric alarm shrieked across the Teluvian Academy's courtyard, just as the sky turned the color of rotting copper. Seren was halfway through demonstrating basic gravitational theory to a cluster of juvenile creche when the first warning pulse hit her neural implant. Inside now. Professor. Zaldan's mandibles clacked urgently as he herded his students toward the reinforced shelters. The elderly Anthorian's 6 legs moved with surprising speed for someone his age. Seren looked up at the roiling sky. She'd read about Teluvian ion storms in the orientation materials, but the sanitized descriptions hadn't captured the sheer violence brewing overhead. Purple lightning arced between clouds that moved like living things, and the air itself seemed to vibrate with malicious intent. Miss Seren. A small voice called from near the ornamental gardens. She spun around. Varric, barely 4 cycles old, stood frozen beside the decorative plasma fountain. The creche cub's crystalline fur was already beginning to stand on end, reacting to the electromagnetic buildup. Behind him, 3 more cubs huddled together, their species-specific panic responses rendering them immobile. The second alarm sounded. 90 seconds to impact. Every other teacher and student had already evacuated. Seren could see the shelter doors beginning their automated closure sequence. Heavy durasteel panels sliding into place with mechanical inevitability. Protocol was clear. Once the storms hit, nothing could survive outside for more than a few minutes. The ionized particles would strip flesh from bone, cook internal organs, and shatter crystalline biology into powder. Seren ran. Her human legs, weaker than most species at the Academy, nonetheless carried her across the courtyard in long strides. She reached Varric just as the first ionized droplets began to fall, each one hissing where it struck stone. "I can't move," Varric whimpered, his translator barely functioning through his fear. "My legs won't work." "I know, sweetie. I've got you." Seren scooped him up with one arm, feeling his small body trembling against her chest. She turned to the other 3 cubs, a Yethian with membranous wings, a juvenile Dralthine whose carapace was still soft, and a tiny Philosian who couldn't have been more than 2 cycles old. 60 seconds. The shelter doors were closing. She'd never make it with 4 cubs, not at human speed, not with them frozen in instinctual terror. Seren made her decision. She pulled off her coat, a thick, insulated thing designed for human comfort in the Academy's climate-controlled but still chilly environment. It was expensive, lined with synthetic fibers that regulated temperature and repelled moisture. More importantly, it was large enough. "Under here, all of you, now." She spread the coat like a tent, creating a small shelter. The cubs crawled beneath it, their various forms of communication all expressing the same confusion and fear. 40 seconds. Seren crouched over them, pulling the coat down to cover their small bodies as completely as possible. She could feel Varric's crystalline fur pressing against her abdomen. The Yithian's wings folded awkwardly against her thigh, the Dralthine's shell hard against her knee. The shelter doors sealed with a final, thunderous clang. 20 seconds. "Miss Seren, you need to come under too." Varric's muffled voice emerged from beneath the coat. "There's no room for— Shh, keep your heads down. Don't look up, no matter what you hear." 10 seconds. The storm hit like the wrath of an angry god. The first wave of ionized particles slammed into Seren's back with the force of a physical blow. She gasped, feeling her skin immediately begin to burn. The coat protected the cubs beneath her, but she was fully exposed. Arms spread wide to hold the coat's edges down, back arched over her small charges. The pain was exquisite. Her neural implant screamed warnings about radiation exposure, cellular damage, critical system failure. She muted it. The numbers didn't matter. Only the small, fragile lives beneath her mattered. Purple lightning struck the courtyard close enough that she could smell ozone and her own burning hair. The electromagnetic pulse made her teeth ache and her vision blur. Through watering eyes, she could see the plasma fountain explode into shrapnel that whistled past her head. "Stay down," she gritted out, though she wasn't sure if the cubs could hear her over the storm's howl. Time became meaningless. Seconds stretched into eternities. Each wave of ionized particles felt like being flayed alive. Her skin blistered, cracked, bled. The Academy's medical systems would have something to say about her decision later, assuming there was a later. But beneath her, the cubs were safe. She could feel them breathing, trembling but alive. The storm's fury was programmed by Tuluvian's orbit and atmospheric composition. 7 minutes of hell. Then silence. Seren counted heartbeats instead of seconds. Her human heart, inefficient compared to many species but stubborn in its rhythm, gave her something to focus on beyond the pain. 4,200 beats later, the storm broke. The silence was almost worse than the noise. Seren couldn't move. Her muscles had locked, her nervous system overloaded. She remained frozen in position, a human statue shielding 4 small lives. She heard the shelter doors opening, heard shouting in multiple languages, heard Professor Zalden's horrified mandible click when he saw her. "The cubs," she managed to whisper. "Check the cubs first." Gentle appendages, hands, claws, tentacles lifted the coat away. The 4 small forms beneath were unharmed, their fur and scales and membranes intact. Varric looked up at Seren with his large, multifaceted eyes. "You stayed," he said simply, as if that explained everything. Perhaps it did. They carried Seren to the medical center where regeneration tanks and concerned doctors awaited. The burns would heal. The radiation damage would be repaired, and in a few weeks, she'd be back teaching gravitational theory to cubs who would always remember the day a human showed them what courage looked like. But as they sealed her into the regeneration tank, as the healing fluids began their work, Seren smiled. Because in that moment, covered in burns and barely conscious, she'd done something that would ripple through the galaxy's consciousness. She'd proven that humans didn't calculate survival odds or optimize for self-preservation. When the storm struck, when every rational species sought shelter, a human had stayed outside, and that made all the difference.